Dust Creek was a town built on dry promises and crooked fences. It sprawled like a stain across the red earth, its bones sun-bleached and brittle, where time dragged its boots and gossip cracked louder than gunfire. The air smelled of scorched cedar and old rust, and by mid-morning the dust rose like ghosts, swaying over broken boards and church steeples with equal indifference. Magnolia Boone stepped down from her mule with a grunt, the creak of the saddle echoing off the storefronts like a challenge. She was a woman the town measured by width, not weight. Every inch of her broad-shouldered frame bore the echoes of struggle, and still she stood straighter than any man had lately dared. Her dress, faded navy and patched at the elbows, billowed in the wind like a flag nobody had the courage to salute. She walked past the smithy, past the cantina where the piano had long stopped playing, and past the row of chairs where old men carved judgment into every passing soul with the blunt blades of their tongues. Their eyes followed her, sliding over her like grease down a pan. Disgust first, then discomfort, then something they didn't want to admit might be fair. "She's back again," one murmured. "Not quietly enough." "Markin' a fool of herself," said another, spitting between his boots. The sheriff's office sat like a scar on Main Street, plain, narrow, tired. Behind the bars of the window sat Sheriff Elias Grady, hat dipped low, cane leaning beside him like an old regret. He watched her pass with the stillness of a man used to watching fires burn too long to believe they could be put out. Magnolia didn't look his way. Her boots thudded up the saloon steps. 3, slow, deliberate, and when the doors swung open, the chatter inside stopped like a throat being closed by a rope. Men sat frozen, cards mid-air, glasses mid-tap. Magnolia's shadow cast long, dark fingers across the floorboards. She found Mayor Eustace Merritt by the bar, bloated with self-regard and cheap whiskey. His vest strained at the buttons. He turned when he saw her, lips already puckering with something mean. "I heard you're hiring again," Magnolia said. Her voice was low and clean, like rain on tin. "I came to volunteer." The silence that followed was thick and brittle. Eustace let out a barking laugh, clutching his belly like it might rupture. "You?" he wheezed. "Volunteer? Hell, Magnolia. I said we needed help riding out those bandits, not someone to bake him a pie." Snickers bloomed around the room. One man let out a donkerbray laugh that ended in a cough. Another raised his glass and toasted. "To Big Mags, savior of Dust Creek." Magnolia didn't flinch. "You've sent 30 men, haven't you?" she said, voice unshaken. 30 who came back limping or not at all. "What's your plan now, Mayor? Hire a 31st fool and call it a strategy." "You're out of line," he growled, his face flushed. "I'm not asking for permission," she said. "I'm telling you, no one knows this land better than me. No one rides its edges like I do. You want your water lines fixed, your fences guarded, your horses kept. You need someone who's not afraid to be out there, day and night. You think just cause you outweigh a man you outmatch him," he barked. Magnolia stepped closer. The room held its breath. "I think I've buried a man braver than all of you, and raised a child on grit and splinters. I think I know how to outweight drought, coyotes, and loneliness. That more than can be said of the boys you sent before me." Merritt leaned in, his breath sour. "You a joke, Magnolia." Behind her, the saloon doors creaked open. Elias Grady entered slowly, his limp thick today, the wood of his cane tapping like a ticking clock. He said nothing, just stood by the wall, eyes on her. "Well," Merritt said, grinning now, "if the sheriff wants to speak up, maybe he can explain why he hasn't managed to solve a thing neither." The room turned toward Elias. His silence cut deeper than Merritt's noise. Elias's voice finally came, gravel rubbed smooth. "She rides the north fence every week. Fixed 3 water leaks herself last month. Found tracks I couldn't. That counts for something, Dut." Gasps and mutters flew like dust devils. "You back in her now, Grady." Merritt barked. Elias only said, "I'm saying the 30 men you hired failed. I ain't seen her fail yet." Magnolia stared at Elias. He didn't meet her eyes, but he didn't look away either. Merritt waved a hand like swatting a fly. "Fine. She wants to waste her time. Let her. but I won't be held responsible when the buzzards start circling her bones. She turned without a word and walked back down the saloon steps. The sun was lower now, bleeding amber across the roofs. Her mule waited patiently, the same way everything that mattered in her life had ever done, with quiet endurance. When she reached home, the wind had turned colder. The screen door banged once behind her. Inside, Clara Bell crouched on the floor, cradling a runt piglet wrapped in burlap. The girl's eyes lit up when she saw her mother. "They said you were at the saloon," Clara whispered. "That they laughed." "They did," Magnolia said, hanging her hat. "But a laugh don't stop a storm from rolling in." They sat by the hearth, the piglet between them, firelight carving stories into their faces. Clara traced the lines in her mother's calloused hand. "They think you can't do it." "They always did," Magnolia said. But thinking never built a fence or held a dying man's hand. Night deepened. Outside, a howl split the hills, low and long. Then another. Horses whinnied from the barn. Magnolia stood slowly and stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing at the sound. From the edge of the field came a flicker, lantern light, not hers. Moving fast. Moving wrong. She didn't blink. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. At dawn, the land wore silence like a fresh wound. The sky was pale as a sucked bone, clouds hung low and heavy, and the ground steamed faintly from the night's breath. Magnolia Boone rode out before the rooster crowed, the mule's hooves muffled in the soft dirt, a canvas sack strapped behind her full of rope, oil, and sharp questions. Her silhouette moved through the morning mist like folklore, unhurried, unbroken, and already halfway legend. The canyon waited, steep, ragged, and scoured by trouble. She stopped by the first waterline near the gulch. One of the clamps had been wrenched loose, pipe torn like a rib. She dismounted, knelt, and ran her palm across the dirt, deep grooves. Hoof marks. 5 or 6 horses, heading west, careless. They weren't ranch hands. They didn't bother to hide. Magnolia worked with quiet focus, her large hands graceful in their own way, turning wrench and wire like a surgeon tending a dying body. The pipe hissed to life. Cold water sputtered then flowed. She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist and stood, the sunrise kissing the edges of her jaw. A twig snapped behind her. Sheriff Elias Grady stood near the cottonwoods, leaning on his cane. His long coat fluttered in the breeze, one side darker with old bloodstains that never quite washed out. "Didn't figure you for a morning rider," she said, not turning. "I figured you'd be out here. Thought I'd see what all the town whispering was about." Magnolia gave him a sideways glance, wary. "That why you're following me?" "Wasn't following," he said. "Just didn't want you riding alone." She raised an eyebrow. "Don't recall anyone caring if I ride alone." Elias looked down at the track marks she'd exposed. "You're right about the horses. That's not local traffic. They've been dragging something, too. Look, see that flat groove beside the prints?" Magnolia stepped beside him, and together they crouched over the trail like 2 hawks studying prey. She could smell dust, leather, the worn scent of his coat. He smelled like memory. "They're pulling fence posts," she murmured. "Stealing wood again. Likely for fire. Or barricades." Elias nodded. "This far north, they're getting bold." There was silence then, not the empty kind, but the heavy, charged sort, the silence of 2 people standing on opposite sides of the same herd. "You shouldn't be the one out here," he said finally. "I shouldn't be a widow either, but the world don't care much for should," she replied. He didn't argue. They followed the tracks until the canyon narrowed, the walls pressing in like a closing hand. Elias winced with every step, his limp pronounced. Magnolia offered nothing, not pity, not comment, just slowed her pace to match his. That small gesture said more than a sermon. At a ridge above the ravine, they stopped. Below, in the sparse trees, a makeshift camp sprawled. Tattered tents, stolen goods, a rusted wagon wheel still spinning. 4 men and a boy sat by a dwindling fire, unaware they were being watched. "They're close enough to strike," Elias muttered. "Close enough to poison the well. Or drive the herds off entirely," she said. "This ain't scavenging. It's a slow bleed. Elias pulled his rifle from his back. His hands shook. He steadied them. You still shoot true? Magnolia asked. Some days. Is today one of them? He glanced at her. You offering a better shot? She didn't smile, but her eyes glinted. I don't need to shoot. I just need to make him move. She pointed to a narrow trail behind the camp. See that bend? There's a wasp nest under the ridge ledge. If I can throw my oil flask right. Elias frowned. You'll get stung to hell. I've been stung worse by smaller things. He hesitated, then nodded once. If you run, they'll chase. And you'll circle behind. Count on it. They split like breath and heartbeat. Magnolia looped behind the ridge, her mule tied low in the brush. She crouched, flask in hand, fingers wrapped tight around the neck. She inhaled once, twice, then stepped from cover and launched the glass into the nest with all the fury the town had ever poured on her. It shattered. The oil caught on lantern flame. Yellow jackets erupted like smoke. She ran. The men in the camp screamed, swatting and tripping over themselves. She led them through thorn and stone, boots pounding, lungs burning, heart steady. One broke off, pistol raised. A shot cracked, dirt sprayed near her feet. Then a second shot answered, sharper, cleaner. The man dropped. Elias. Another tried to mount a horse but was dragged as the animal spooked. The boy, barely 16, froze with his hands raised. Magnolia stopped, breath ragged. The wasps were thinning. Smoke curled in the canyon. Elias stepped from the trees, rifle lowered. His hat was gone, hair sweat matted. He looked 10 years younger, or 20 older. It was hard to tell. You all right? He asked. Magnolia nodded. They'll remember that sting. They'll remember the woman who brought it. They walked back through the canyon, past the wrecked camp, past the boy who wouldn't meet her eyes. He didn't shoot, Elias said. Might be worth something. Might be, she agreed. When they reached the mule, she helped Elias into the saddle behind her. They rode back in silence, pressed together by necessity but not discomfort. His arm brushed Hayes once. He didn't pull away. By the time they reached the first fence post, the sun had climbed. Clara Bell was standing there, eyes wide, hands fisted at her sides. Mama, she whispered, they said you were gone. I was, Magnolia said, swinging down. But I came back. She turned to Elias. You too, I suppose. I always come back, he murmured, just been taking the long way. Clara stepped forward, taking her mother's hand. Her fingers were small, but they didn't tremble. Behind them, wind rustled through the grass. And from far off, the church bell rang. Once, then again. Not for death this time. For warning. Or for witness. Night rolled over Dust Creek like a slow storm, curling its fingers around lanterns and chimneys, smothering the stars one by one. The town slept uneasy. A breath held too long. Shadows paced the alleys and dry wind whispered of reckoning. Magnolia Boone stood at the edge of her porch, rifle in hand, face lit by the warm spill of lamplight from inside. The sky above her was a quilt of black and ash, torn by streaks of distant lightning. Beside her, Clara Bell pressed close, watching her mother like the sun watches the tide. Steady, reverent. They'll strike tonight, Magnolia said softly. Clara nodded, her voice a whisper. You sure? I can feel it in the bones. She turned, handed the rifle to her daughter. Stay in the barn. Keep low. Don't come out unless the rooster crows twice. Clara hesitated, then embraced her mother tightly, cheek pressed against the rough fabric of her coat. Magnolia held her for a breath, too, then broke away. The trail to the well snaked along the dry ridge where nothing grew but sand and secrets. Magnolia mounted her mule and rode alone. The saddle groaned beneath her, the leather worn and familiar. Ahead, in the hollows beyond the trees, trouble stirred. She reached the well before midnight. A single torch flickered in the distance. A figure moved, then 3 more. Horses, slow-stepping. Men with rags tied over their faces, carrying tools, rifles, something sloshing in a barrel. She dismounted, moved like a shadow along the rocks. From the south came the low thrum of boots, Elias Grady. Right on time. His rifle would be trained. But it was her hand that would cast the die. She circled until she was behind them. The wind shifted, bringing the stink of kerosene. They were going to dump it straight into the well. Poison the town's last lifeline. She stepped out from behind a boulder, shotgun raised. "Drop it," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Four heads turned. One man raised his weapon. She fired once, deliberate, high. The shot struck the barrel. It buzzed, flames licking the night. The mule behind her screamed. The men scattered. One dove toward her, blade drawn. She swung the butt of the gun and caught him in the jaw. He crumpled. Another aimed. A sharp crack split the air, Elias's rifle. The man fell with a grunt. A third took off running. Magnolia gave chase. Her boots pounded dirt, her breath burned. He tripped at the ridge, rolled, and came up with a pistol. She stopped. He was young, 20s maybe. Eyes too wild, hands too shaky. "Don't," she warned. "I'll shoot you. I swear," he gasped. "I believe you," she said. "And I don't blame you." He faltered, confused. "But you'll have to shoot a woman who lost everything already," she continued. "And there's not much pain left that can scare me." He blinked. "Or," she added, lowering her gun, "you can choose to live like a man who turns around." He dropped the pistol. Behind them, Elias limped into view, panting, one hand at his ribs. "You always pick the hard way?" he asked, breath ragged. "It's the only one that works," she said. They returned to town with two men tied to the mule and one limping behind with his hands up. Elias walked beside her, slow, his shoulder brushing hers. No one spoke. By dawn, Dust Creek stirred to life. News traveled like fire in dry grass. Folks emerged from doorways in boots and nightshirts. When they saw her, walking tall beside the sheriff, dragging justice in her wake, they didn't laugh. One man took off his hat. Another crossed himself. At the edge of the street, Mayor Merritt appeared, red-faced and stiff. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words dried out. "You'll want to fix the well fence," Magnolia said to him as she passed. "We stopped them tonight, but they'll be back." He said nothing. At the jail, the prisoners were locked away. Elias sat on the step, wincing as he eased down. Magnolia stood beside him. "You limp in worse than usual," she said. He looked up, smiled faintly. "You're not." She lowered herself beside him, breath slow. "You came," he said. "I didn't have much choice." He turned to her. "That ain't true. You always had a choice." They sat in silence as the sun spilled over the rooftops, bathing the town in soft gold. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like exile, it felt earned. Clara Bell came running from the road, her arms wrapped around her mother's waist. Magnolia leaned into her, just enough to let the girl know everything was all right. Not perfect, not safe, but all right. Elias handed Magnolia a small bundle wrapped in canvas. She opened it slowly. Inside was a carved rein handle, smooth oak, shaped with K. "It broke off my old saddle," he said. "Been meaning to give it to someone who knew how to use it." She turned it over in her hands. "Thank you," she said. He touched her shoulder, just once, and stood. Later, when the town had settled, when the gossip had turned from mocking to awe, Magnolia stood alone beneath the cottonwood tree behind her home. Wind stirred the leaves above her like a choir. She looked up at the branches, then out toward the hills. The mule grazed nearby. The barn door swung gently on its hinges. Somewhere inside, Clara Bell sang a tune from a better time. Magnolia closed her eyes. No cheers, no medals, just earth underfoot and air in her lungs. And it was enough. Some say you can still feel the strength she left behind in Dust Creek, that when storms roll in from the north, the cottonwood tree leans just slightly toward them, like it remembers. And maybe that's the lesson, that grace doesn't always gallop in loud. Sometimes it walks on sore feet, in a body cold too much, carrying dignity like a flame that refuses to go out. So if the world calls you unfit, too wide, too loud, remember her. She didn't ask to lead. She just took the reins when it mattered.